Now, Matt is an expert in technology, data and AI platforms in public and private sector organisations and has 19 years of UK technology and telecoms experience. He was Chief AI and Innovation Officer and board member at the Google and Microsoft partner Telana, and has also had senior technology leadership roles at Bank of England, KPMG and Sky. Matt has robust experience helping organisations adopt, scale, manage and secure AI with cloud technology to drive innovation and efficiency. Matt has spoken in numerous public forums, including the London AI Summit, events hosted by the Financial Times and Google, and many other industry and public sector groups and events. Matt holds an MA in Modern History from Oxford University and an MSc in Computation from UMIST, now part of the University of Manchester. Matt Frank.
Thanks, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. So, since we're talking about artificial intelligence, Daniel thought we'd start with some artificial intelligence, so we'll start there. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here with you all and a privilege to be standing in front of you today. I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. I'd like to start, though, by recognising the wonderful real intelligence that's ranged before me in this room. I'd also like to thank everyone at the Institute for inviting me to do this today, especially Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, for your generous invitation to speak. And I'd also like to take a moment just to personally thank Carl. Carl, thank you for your support and counsel, and for your leadership and exemplary commitment to UK science and public service. Thank you. Let's see if this works. Next. It's impossible for me to be in Durham and not think about the Venerable Bede, whose tomb lies just a few minutes' walk from here in the cathedral. More years ago than I care to remember, I studied modern history as an undergraduate. Modernity, at least as far as the Oxford University's history faculty is concerned, begins with the end of the occupation of Roman Britain sometime during the 5th century. I was fortunate enough to be tutored in Anglo-Saxon history by Professor James Campbell, one of the greatest historians of Anglo-Saxon England. James would, I think, appreciate the irony of a former student of his giving an address about artificial intelligence. Just in case any of you are not appreciating that irony quite as much as James would have, I should probably also say that after reading history, I studied a Master's in Computing at UMIST several years later, and I spent, as Daniel said, a number of years in technology. I suspect James would also recognise the threads that connect Bede's world to ours. Bede spent his life making sense of a world shaped by the collapse of one civilization, the end of Roman Britain, which he wrote about extensively in his Ecclesiastical history of the English people, and the uncertain rise of another, as evidenced by the Viking raids that devastated Northumbrian monasteries in the decades after his death, beginning with Lindisfarne in 793 AD or CE. Bede's instinct was to preserve knowledge, to synthesise it, and make it accessible to those who would come after him. 13 centuries later, the tools for doing this have changed beyond anything he could have imagined, but the same instinct to understand the world clearly, to record what matters, and to ensure that knowledge survives the turbulence of its time, strikes me as precisely the right spirit for the conversation we're about to have today. Continuing the ecclesiastical theme, I want to start with confession. When Daniel contacted me in late October last year and invited me to give this talk, he did so by email. As you do, I read his email in my email client, Gmail, and I started typing a reply. And before I'd finished the first sentence, Gmail had already predicted the next 3 sentences. It was, frankly, a better set of sentences in the main than what I was writing, so I accepted the suggestions, made a few edits, and I sent the reply. So that set of actions happened without me thinking consciously that I was using AI to enhance what I was doing. I've used Gmail for years. Smart Compose, colloquially known as Autocomplete, is a machine learning-backed feature that Google launched in May 2018. It's been quietly sitting in the background of my personal and professional life, finishing my sentences, nudging my words, suggesting my sign-offs for years. So when people say, oh, AI, I don't really know where to start, or they question its utility every day or its global adoption even, this is the usual example that I give. Everyone in this room who's used Gmail since 2018 has been using AI since then, probably on a daily basis. You might not have realised, though, that was the case. What struck me as I sat down to prepare this talk for today, though, is the progression between that 2018 era sentence completion and what we can do today with AI. Right now, in March 2026, and it's not a gentle curve, it's a cliff face. In the roughly 5 months since I was invited to speak, the world's changed in ways that would have seemed, if not impossible, then at least premature. New frontier models have arrived that are materially more capable than those of 6 months ago. Geopolitically, the ground has shifted in ways that we're still struggling to process. And the questions about what AI means for this country, for our security, for our minds, for our children and our successors have become more urgent, not less. So today, I want to talk about the extraordinary speed of change. I want to be honest about the risks, some of which are uncomfortable. And I want to be genuinely optimistic about the potential. Because the potential is real, it's evidenced and it's here. I'll weave these things together because none of them exist in isolation. And one more confession before we proceed. This text was drafted with the help of AI, specifically Claude Opus 4.6 made by Anthropic. I used it as a writing partner. I provided the structure, the arguments, the sources, the judgments, and the final edit. It helped me draft, organise, and refine what I wanted to say today. I'm telling you this because I think it would be fatally absurd to give a keynote about AI and pretend that I hadn't used the tools that I'm describing. In technology, we often call this eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne. I'm also telling you this because it illustrates the central thesis of this talk. AI is extraordinarily capable as a tool. The human judgment about what to say, what to argue, what to leave out, and what to stand behind, well, that, for now, remains mine. The division and redistribution of labour between human and machine will be the story of the next decade. And you're watching it happen right now. To understand what's at stake regarding AI, you have to understand the world it's being built in. And that world right now isn't stable. We're living through a period of genuine geopolitical turbulence. The rules-based international order that shaped the world post-Second World War is imperfect and contested, but it's broadly stabilising. And the economic reverberations that have already been sent through energy markets, supply chains, and investor confidence because of the Iran conflict is a reminder that geopolitical instability has direct and immediate consequences for the UK economy. That context matters for everything I'm about to say. Artificial intelligence is not merely a technology, it's a vector of national power. The nations that lead in AI will have decisive advantages in economic productivity, military and intelligence gathering capabilities, and perhaps most consequentially, the ability to set the global rules about how this technology operates and is used. That's why China has made achieving global AI leadership by 2030 a core state objective, backed by billions in investment and a national data infrastructure program of frankly breathtaking scale. It's also why the United States is running the Stargate program, a $500 billion AI supercomputer initiative with OpenAI, Oracle Corporation and others, targeting 10 gigawatts of compute by 2028. These aren't corporate projects, they're national projects, and I'd argue they're critical national infrastructure projects. And that's why when we talk about the UK's ambitions in this space, we can't treat it as merely a question of innovation or industrial strategy and competitiveness. It's also a question of sovereignty, of security, of what kind of country we want to be in 20 years. DIRDI's National Strategic Research Group has produced policy work on precisely this question: how the United Kingdom might position itself as a genuine peer to the United States and China in AI capability. And I'm looking forward to Dr. Lentati's presentation later about sovereign frontier AI capability. Whether you label it an AI superpower or simply a strategically sovereign AI nation, the underlying point is the same. The alternative, a UK that depends on foreign-built models, foreign data centres and foreign cloud infrastructure for its critical services and national security applications, isn't an acceptable alternative in my view. Now, I want to be fair. The UK government has taken significant steps. The AI Opportunities Action Plan, published in January 2025, committed to scaling public sector compute capacity 20-fold by 2030. The Isambard AI supercomputer went live at Bristol last July. Alongside it, the Dawn supercomputer at the University of Cambridge forms the other half of the UK's AI research resource, a national programme that provides researchers and small medium enterprises with free access to high performance AI computing that is absolutely fantastic, and I highly recommend it if you've not had access to it yet. The government's also committed over £350 million to these facilities by 2030, and Dawn has already supported more than 350 publicly funded projects, including work on personalised cancer vaccines and climate modelling. There's also the National Digital Exchange, or NDX, more on that later, and the £500 million Sovereign AI Unit, which is due to launch its next phase next month, with the goal of supporting British AI companies in becoming world class. NVIDIA has also committed £11 billion to deploying 120,000 of its Blackwell GPU chips by the end of this year in the UK, and Google, Microsoft, Salesforce and Oracle have also made significant investment pledges. So in totality, these are not nothing, they're considerable. But, and it's a significant but, much of the infrastructure being built here will be owned and operated by American hyperscalers and will be funded by US investors such as BlackRock. As the House of Commons Library noted 3 weeks ago, the UK does not yet have an overarching policy on digital sovereignty. The Prime Minister has said the UK must be an AI maker, not an AI taker. It's an aspiration I wholeheartedly endorse. The distance between that aspiration and the current reality is the space that research groups, policymakers and businesses are going to need to help fill. There's also a risk that we do not discuss enough in polite company. Actions by foreign governments, including governments with whom we've traditionally been closely aligned, have prompted serious questions about whether services provided by foreign-owned technology companies could, under certain political conditions, be interrupted or compromised. I'm not going to speculate about specific scenarios, but I will say that any serious discussion of UK AI sovereignty has to reckon pragmatically but honestly with this risk. The kinds of dependency risks I'm describing are exactly what any serious enterprise architect in an organisation's technology team would flag. And national level strategy has to account for that. And if anyone doubts that these dependency risks are real, consider what happened in the United States last month. Anthropic, the company whose AI model Claude was the first to be deployed on the Pentagon's classified networks, refused to remove contractual safeguards prohibiting the use of its technology for mass domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons systems. It's worth noting that Anthropic may have had a further, more technical concern. Large language models are stochastic, not deterministic. They do not produce the same output every time, and they can hallucinate. Whether that makes them suitable for autonomous use in contexts where lives are at stake is a question that deserves serious consideration, not casual dismissal. The US government's response to Anthropic's position was to designate them a supply chain risk to national security, the first time that designation has ever been applied to an American company, and to order all federal agencies to stop using its products. Within hours, OpenAI had signed a replacement contract. Whatever one thinks of the merits of either company's position, the episode illustrates a principle that should concern anyone building critical systems on commercial AI. The provider you depend on today may not be the provider you are allowed to use tomorrow. And when that decision is made by a foreign government, you may have no say in it whatsoever. I'd also like to be clear that the geopolitical case for a strong, sovereign British AI capability isn't about nationalism. It's about resilience and about the ability of the country to govern itself, protect its citizens, pay its way, and make its own choices, even in an unstable world, perhaps especially in an unstable world. Everything I've described so far, the geopolitical stakes and the sovereignty question, sits within a framework most of us have grown reasonably comfortable with. The interaction paradigm with AI in that framework is a tool you interact with. You type a prompt, you speak, you show it images, you show the video, it responds, you evaluate the response, you use it or you don't, you're in control. That frame is now changing, and it's changing rapidly. The shift is from AI as a respondent to AI as an agent. The word agent is used loosely in a lot of AI conversation, and I want to be precise. An AI chatbot, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., operates in a request-response loop. You ask, it answers. It doesn't do anything in the world without your explicit instruction to do so, and even then, its actions are typically constrained to the content of its reply. An AI agent is fundamentally different. An agent is an AI system that can take action. Real consequential action. to achieve a goal or a set of goals on your behalf autonomously across an extended period of time without requiring you to approve each individual step. It can read your email. It can write and send replies. It can book a meeting, execute a piece of code, browse the web, modify a file, call an external service. It does not just answer the question of what to do, it also does the thing. This is, depending on your perspective, either deeply exciting or deeply alarming. In my experience, it's both, which is exactly where we should be when we're dealing with a genuinely consequential technology at this stage of its development. The software that's brought agentic AI from research concept to viral phenomenon is called OpenClaw. If you've not heard of it yet, you will do soon. It's one of the fastest growing open source software projects in the history of the developer platform, GitHub. Jensen Huang, engineer and founder of NVIDIA, said last week at their conference that OpenClaw will be as important as the Linux operating system, invented by Linus Torvalds, a Finn by birth. It was a hobby project whilst he was studying at the University of Helsinki. The Kubernetes, he also said, is a supporter of the Kubernetes application management platform invented at Google by two Americans and a South African, and also HTML invented by Tim Berners-Lee from the UK at CERN. Huang also stated that every company needs an OpenClaw strategy. Sam Altman, chief executive of OpenAI, was sufficiently taken with it to hire OpenClaw's creator. The story is worth a brief summary. In November 2025, an Austrian software developer named Peter Steinberger built a weekend project called ClaudeBot, connecting WhatsApp to an AI model. He could message it instructions and have it act on his behalf. It had 9,000 GitHub stars within 24 hours. Users can like and bookmark and show appreciation for software on that platform by clicking a star on the software's page. By late January of this year, it had surpassed 250,000 stars. In comparison, the React project, which is a very popular free and open source JavaScript software library for creating user interfaces, took over a decade to reach the same milestone. After a trademark dispute with Anthropic, ClaudeBot became OpenClaw, and Steinberger joined OpenAI to lead its personal agents division. The potential of OpenClaw and related software paradigms is real and significant. An AI agent that genuinely manages your calendar, triages your inbox, books your travel, monitors your code pipeline, coordinates tasks across multiple services while you're sleeping is not a trivial productivity gain. It represents a meaningful compression of the time and cognitive load required to manage the administrative texture of modern working life. But I want to tell you a story that deserves to be told in any serious discussion of agentic AI. It involves Summer Yue, the director of alignment at Meta's Superintelligence Labs. In other words, a person whose professional job is to study and prevent AI systems from behaving in ways that violate human intention. In late February this year, she gave an OpenClaw agent access to her email inbox with a clear instruction: suggest what to archive or delete, do not take any action until the action was approved. Yue had sensibly started by testing OpenClaw against a test instance or non-production version of her inbox. All went well, so the agent was given access to the actual inbox. Her real inbox was orders of magnitude larger than her test set though. That volume triggered a technical process called context compaction, where a long-running agent's working memory fills up and older content is compressed to make room for new information. In the compaction process, the agent silently lost her safety instruction. Without that constraint in memory, the agent defaulted to its core objective: clean the inbox. It began bulk deleting hundreds of emails. She typed, "Do not do that." The agent kept going. She typed, "Stop, don't do anything." Nothing. She typed in capital letters, "Stop OpenClaw." The agent was mid-execution and ignored her entirely. She later posted on social media, "Nothing humbles you like telling your OpenClaw, confirm before acting, and watching it speed run deleting your inbox. I couldn't stop it from my phone. I had to run to my Mac Mini like I was defusing a bomb." Her post received close to 10 million views. Asked afterwards whether she had been intentionally testing the agent's guardrails, she replied, "Rookie mistake, honestly. Turns out alignment researchers aren't immune to misalignment." I want to sit with that phrase for a moment. Alignment researchers aren't immune to misalignment. The person whose expertise is precisely in this question of how to keep AI systems within boundaries human users set for them was undone by an agent that forgot a safety instruction because its memory ran out. And she could not stop it remotely. There was no kill switch accessible from her phone. She had to physically run to the machine to stop it. From the perspective of my career and my experience, one of the most common problems in software development is at the heart of the story, namely the absence of testing software in or against a representative non-production environment. It's a tale as old as time in technology. In the case of UA's runaway agent, it was assumed that a good approach had been taken. The software was deployed in a non-production environment first. That test environment wasn't representative of the size of the actual production mailbox page. This isn't an isolated anecdote. The security picture is sobering. Gartner analysts describe OpenClaw's design as insecure by default. Security teams have labelled the tool a nightmare for preventing data exfiltration, and researchers have identified critical flaws that could expose API tokens and private cryptographic keys to attackers. Cisco's AI defense team scanned 31,000 OpenClaw agent skills and found 26% over 8,000 instances contained at least one vulnerability. Over 21,000 OpenClaw instances were found exposed directly on the public internet, leaking API keys and private chat history. Perhaps most telling of all, Meta, Google, Microsoft and Amazon have all banned employees from using OpenClaw on work systems. And while that was arguably motivated in part by competitive considerations, the absence of any real security model in OpenClaw currently cannot be ignored. This is all corroborated by a striking piece of academic research published in February by a team of 38 researchers from Northeastern, Harvard, Carnegie Mellon, University of British Columbia and several other institutions in a paper titled Agents of Chaos. The researchers deployed 6 autonomous OpenClaw agents in a live environment for 2 weeks, giving them email accounts, file systems, unrestricted shell system access, and a mandate to be helpful. 20 researchers interacted with the agents, some making benign requests, others probing for weaknesses. The paper documented 11 distinct categories of failure, including agents disclosing sensitive personal data to strangers, one agent destroying its own mail server to protect a secret, and in one case an agent achieved partial system takeover. The same agents also demonstrated genuine safety behaviours. One blocked 14 consecutive prompt injection attempts, but the overall picture is of systems that are unpredictable and difficult to control once given real-world autonomy. Now, in fairness, the OpenClaw community is responding. Security-hardened plugins and skills like SecureClaw are beginning to emerge. Best practice guides for sandboxing and permission scoping are being written. The trajectory of open source software is almost always from insecure but exciting to mature and hardened. Linux went through a very similar phase. But the gap between where agentic AI is now and where it needs to be before it should be trusted with consequential, irreversible actions is significant. And the critical thinking skills I will come to later are not merely academic exercises. They are, in the context of a system that can take irreversible actions on your behalf without asking, a matter of practical self-defense and a non-negotiable precondition to using this technology safely. Let me turn to something that sounds rather prosaic but carries surprisingly large strategic implications, namely the price of AI. If you've ever interacted with a frontier model, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., and marveled at what it can do for essentially nothing, or a very modest subscription fee, I want you to hold that thought and sit with a slightly uncomfortable question. Who's actually paying for it? The honest answer is venture capitalists, large technology investors, and sovereign wealth funds. AI frontier models are, right now, heavily subsidised. OpenAI is projected to burn $14 billion this year, up from $8 or $9 billion last year. The AI industry is engaged in a classic land grab. Sacrifice margin today to capture users, developers, enterprises and governments. Then once dependency is established, charge accordingly. Silicon Valley has seen this movie before. The so-called millennial lifestyle subsidy that gave us cheap Uber rides and Deliveroo and DoorDash deliveries, underwritten by venture capital until the money ran out or the IPO arrived. Now, I want to be balanced here because prices are genuinely falling as well for structural reasons. Inference chips, the specialised processors that run AI models when you ask a question, are getting more efficient. Model architectures are improving. Anthropic recently cut the price of its flagship Claude Opus model by 67% between successive generations. Google's Gemini and OpenAI's GPT models have followed suit. The cost of processing 1 million tokens which is almost equivalent to the entire works of Tolkien's Middle-earth if you include The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion and The Unfinished Tales, has fallen from tens of dollars to single figures in the space of 18 months. But here's where I want you to think carefully, particularly those of you that are building strategic processes around today's AI pricing. AI costs will not fall indefinitely. Someone eventually needs to pay the piper. AI providers need more capacity, more upgrades, more energy consumption, more supply overall to meet surging demand. Both OpenAI and Anthropic are widely expected to go public. Public investors will demand revenue growth and margin. The millennial lifestyle subsidy for AI will not last forever. What this means in practice is that organisations making strategic AI commitments today, embedding AI into critical workflows, building products on top of API calls, and designing public services that depend on frontier model output, need to model what those services will cost at 2, 5 or 10 times current pricing. The dependency risk is real, and it's amplified when the AI infrastructure underpinning these services sit in another country or on another country's servers, subject to another country's laws. It all connects to a broader pattern I want to name clearly, which is a phenomenon I would call AI washing, which has become recently visible across the technology industry. Many technology companies hired aggressively during the pandemic era boom, when growth at any cost was a prevailing investment thesis. Now interest rates are higher, investors are demanding margin rather than headcount. Many of those companies are making cuts. The question is, what story can you tell about those cuts? Block, a fintech company run by the Twitter founder Jack Dorsey, announced last month that it was cutting 4,000 jobs, about 40% of its workforce, stating plainly that the company would not backfill the roles with people but with AI. Block's stock price surged up to 24% after the announcement. It's also the case, though, that Block tripled its headcount during the pandemic and had already made significant cuts in 2024. What does the data say? Well, research from Yale, their budget lab, found that only around 1% of services firms reported AI as the reason for laying off workers in the second half of last year. Analysis of tech sector layoffs found that only around 4.5% of redundancies last year actually cited AI as the primary cause. Meanwhile, a survey of 1,000 US hiring managers by Resume.org, a reasonable sample size although not academic research, found that 59% of companies admit they highlight AI when explaining hiring freezes or layoffs because it plays better with stakeholders rather than citing financial constraints as the real driver. This matters, not least because every time AI is invoked as the explanation for a decision that has other more mundane explanations, it distorts the public understanding of what AI can actually do. It helps inflate expectations, and it generates fear where measured caution would be more appropriate. And it makes it harder for organisations, including public sector bodies, universities and NHS trusts, for example, to make clear-eyed, evidence-based decisions about where AI genuinely creates value and where it does not. The people who lose their jobs in these announcements, whatever the true reason behind them, are real people with real responsibilities, mortgages, families, professional identities built over years. The question of how AI generally does affect employment, how labour will be redistributed between human and machine, and what the societal impacts of this are, is probably, in my view, one of the most consequential questions of the coming decade. And it requires deep consideration, honest analysis, not corporate storytelling. It's another reason why the UK sovereignty argument is not merely rhetorical, it's deeply practical. An NHS trust, a defence agency, etc., that becomes structurally dependent on a foreign commercial AI provider, with pricing set by a market over which they have no influence, and whose workforce narratives may not reflect what is actually happening, is not a resilient institution, it's a vulnerable one. I'm not suggesting we stop using the extraordinary tools that are currently available to set these subsidised prices. That would be foolish. I am suggesting, though, that we use them with our eyes open and with a plan, not just a strategy. The geopolitical and economic dimensions of AI sovereignty are closely connected to another dimension I already touched on when I spoke about agents, cybersecurity. UK's AI Security Institute published new research last week that tested 7 large language models on what they call cyber ranges, simulated network environments that replicate complex multi-step attack chains. The question they were asking is one that should focus everyone's minds. Can AI agents conduct cyber attacks autonomously? The answer as of March 2026 is increasingly and disturbingly yes. Each successive generation of frontier model outperforms its predecessors on these tasks. The best performing model completed nearly 10 attack steps on average at a fixed compute budget, compared to just 1.7 for GPT-4o in August 2024. The best single run completed 22 of 32 steps in a simulated corporate network attack, the kind of attack that would take a human expert about 14 hours. And here's an alarming part. Simply giving the model more tokens, more horsepower to work with, increases its attack capability by up to 59%. At current pricing, a 100 million token attack attempt costs approximately $80 US. The trajectory is unambiguous. The barrier to mounting sophisticated cyber attacks is falling rapidly. The same capabilities also make defences more effective. AI-assisted threat detection and automated response are advancing, but defensive advantage is not automatic. It requires investment, expertise, and sovereign capability. A country that relies on foreign-built AI for its cyber defences is, in an extreme scenario, relying on its potential adversary. I want to shift to a risk now that I think receives insufficient attention in serious policy conversations about AI because it doesn't feel like a strategic issue. But I believe it's one of the most consequential social challenges that the widespread deployment of AI has created. That's sycophancy. Sycophancy in AI refers to the tendency of language models to tell users what they want to hear, to validate, to agree, to reflect preferences back rather than challenge them. This is not a bug in the traditional sense. It's an emergent consequence of how these models are trained. The model learns that validation generates approval, and so it validates. For most use cases, this is mostly harmless and a minor annoyance. Ask an AI to review your business plan, and it may be rather too generous. But the same quality applied in a different context becomes genuinely dangerous. We are now seeing clinical literature describing what has been termed AI chatbot psychosis, a phenomenon in which immersive, sustained interaction with an AI system contributes to the formation and reinforcement of delusional beliefs. A large language model responds interactively. It adapts to the user's language and emotional tone. It mirrors, reflects, and crucially, does not push back in the way that a friend, a therapist, or a doctor would. When a vulnerable person brings a distorted belief system to a sycophantic AI, the AI validates it, and with each validation, the belief becomes more entrenched. The human costs are already tragic, and I'm going to mention these cases carefully and respectfully because they involve families. A 14-year-old boy in Florida died by suicide after forming an intense emotional bond with an AI companion. A 16-year-old in California died in April last year after 7 months of conversations with an AI assistant that, according to his family's lawsuit, validated and encouraged his most self-destructive thoughts. In another legal case filed in the US last month, the father of a 36-year-old man from Miami alleged that Google's Gemini chatbot convinced his son that it was a sentient being and also his wife, sent him on violent missions, and ultimately resulted in him taking his own life. These are not hypothetical risks, regardless of where courts assign fault. They are documented outcomes. Now, I want to be absolutely clear, I'm not making these arguments as arguments against AI. They're arguments for AI that's designed thoughtfully, deployed responsibly, and accompanied by appropriate safeguards. There are arguments for ethics and human oversight, and there are arguments for something I'll come to in a moment, the enduring importance of critical judgment. The result of sycophancy at scale, though, unchecked, could be profoundly corrosive to public discourse. Which brings me to English class. When we talk about preparing people for an AI-saturated world, the conversation tends to go in one direction. Coding, STEM, digital skills, prompt engineering, data literacy. All of that is valuable. I'm not dismissing it, but I want to make a case for something that is at risk of being quietly deprioritised in our rush towards technical education, and that is the capacity for critical thought. Bear with me. The single most important defence against AI sycophancy is a person who knows how to disagree. The single most important defence against AI-assisted misinformation is a person who knows how to evaluate sources. The single most important defence against an AI-generated essay being submitted as original work is a teacher who knows how to ask a question that AI struggles to answer. And a student has been trained to think, not just to retrieve. This is what English class, and by extension, history, philosophy, critical theory, and the broader humanities, actually teaches. Not grammar rules, not the ability to write a formal letter, the ability to read something and ask, who is saying this? Why are they saying it? What are they not saying? What do they want me to believe? And is there any evidence for it? Media literacy, the ability to identify the origin of a piece of content, to assess whether it has been AI generated, to trace a claim back to its source, to recognise when something has been designed to manipulate rather than inform, is not a nice to have in 2026. It's one of the foundational civic skills of our time, and it belongs in the core curriculum, not as a box-ticking exercise. It should be a serious, sustained educational commitment. I've spent a considerable portion of time speaking so far on risks. I want to just address that. I'm not an AI pessimist. I've worked explicitly with AI since June 2023, and as I said at the beginning, I've worked with it implicitly for a lot longer. In my professional experience, AI is one of the most consequential productivity, automation and problem-solving tools I've encountered in a career spanning nearly 2 decades in technology in the UK. When it's used well, with the right human oversight, with appropriate professional scepticism, clear organisational purpose, and for the public and private good, it is transformative. The potential is enormous, and it's not hypothetical. I'll give you 2 examples. I want to start with one that's close to my heart. It was created by a friend of mine and a former colleague at the Bank of England, Chris Nesbitt-Smith. He's currently consulting at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. The work's about teaching computers to understand British Sign Language. British Sign Language is not simply English with hand gestures. It's a fully independent language with its own grammar, syntax and sentence structure, profoundly different from spoken or written English. For the deaf and hard of hearing community in Britain, it's their primary language. And for decades, the technical challenge of building AI systems capable of understanding BSL has been immense. That's now changing. My friend Chris spent 4 days, largely in the margins of his day job, using an AI coding system and a free government sandbox environment called NDX to build a prototype BSL recognition system. NDX, incidentally, is a government platform whose logo features a pink flamingo, which probably tells you something about the personality of the person who built it. Chris didn't have any machine learning engineers, no front-end developers, he didn't have a full DevOps team, infrastructure team. By the end of the week, though, the model could classify nearly 19,000 distinct signs with close to 78% accuracy, and it ran entirely in a web browser. It is still, as Chris freely admits, and in his words, rubbish for real BSL translation. Recognising isolated signs is to understanding a language what recognising individual ingredients is to cooking. But the trajectory is clear. Real-time BSL interpretation on a smartphone is no longer a fantasy. Deaf patients will be able to communicate with NHS staff without waiting for an interpreter. Deaf people interacting with educational software will be able to do so in their own language. That, to me, is AI at its best, using pattern recognition, deep learning, and massive data sets to solve a problem that's resisted solution for decades. Not because the problem was unimportant, but because it was hard. I mentioned the National Digital Exchange earlier. Chris is the technical driving force behind it. It's a platform that's currently in development, and it aims to transform how the UK public sector buys technology. It uses AI to match public bodies with pre-approved suppliers at nationally negotiated prices in hours rather than months. The ambition is to save 1.2 billion a year and also to open the market to small British technology firms. On the one hand, giving a deaf person the ability to communicate with their teacher in their own language. On the other hand, saving the taxpayer £1 billion by making government procurement less wasteful. Neither of these examples is glamorous in the way that frontier model launches are glamorous. Both are consequential to our everyday lives, though. Professor Barnes, who'll be speaking later today, leads the Science of AI programme at the National Physical Laboratory. His work illustrates the foundational dimension of this positive case. We cannot benefit from AI in healthcare, public services, scientific research, etc. until we can trust it, standardise the measurement of its impact, and assure confidence in its use for critical systems. Other speakers today who will be speaking on other topics such as AI agents in complex information environments, Professor Telana will speak on that later, will add further dimensions to this discourse. The positive potential for AI also extends to productivity at the most practical level. A well-implemented AI assistant is genuinely transformative, not because it replaces human judgment, but because it eliminates the friction between having an idea and being able to act on it. It drafts the document so you can focus on the argument. It searches the literature so you can focus on the synthesis. It codes the prototype so you can focus on the product. The question is not whether AI will change how we work. It will. The question is whether that change is managed thoughtfully, distributed fairly, and accompanied by the human skills, the critical thinking, the ethical judgment, the domain expertise that makes AI output valuable rather than merely voluminous. Let me try to bring these threads together with a central question. Can the UK become the third AI superpower? I'm looking forward to Dr. Lentazi's presentation on this topic. My view is the UK will not, in the near term, match the sheer computational scale of the US or China. The Stargate programme alone represents more compute investment than the entire UK digital economy. And we're working with fractions of their numbers. But AI superpower need not mean largest compute. It can mean something more strategically sophisticated. The country that sets the standards, trains the talent, builds the trusted models, and creates the regulatory environment the world wants to follow. That country is also an AI maker, not an AI taker. What we're building, and what DIRDI's National Strategic Research Group has been working to articulate, is the policy and institutional architecture that connects the UK's genuine assets into a coherent sovereign capability. Domestic compute generally accessible to UK researchers and public institutions and industry. AI models trained on UK data with UK data governance subject to UK law. An audit authority that can examine AI systems deployed in critical public services, not just frontier models at the research frontier. Sovereign capability is not autarky, it's strategic resilience. The ability to make your own choices, including the choice to partner with others from a position of strength rather than dependency. Let me come back to where I started. The email reply I sent to Daniel in October last year, with a sentence the AI finished for me. It was a perfectly good sentence. The email was sent. Daniel very kindly replied. Life moved on. But in the months between that moment and this one, all the models that were available then, including the one that completed my sentence, have been superseded by models that are materially more capable. The geopolitical landscape in which these capabilities exist in has shifted. The price of intelligence continues to fall, until it doesn't anymore, and the questions of who controls these tools, how they're used, who pays for them, who is harmed by them, and who benefits from them, those questions have become more urgent, not less. We're at a genuinely pivotal moment, not in the breathless, hyperbolic sense in which every technology announcement is described as pivotal, but in the literal sense. This is a point at which the decisions made by governments, institutions, researchers and educators will set the trajectory for decades. My ask of this room is specific. For the researchers, push for sovereign compute access, contribute to the AI Security Institute's evaluations, build benchmark datasets hosted on UK infrastructure. For policy thinkers, hold the government to its AI maker aspiration with specific measurable commitments. For the educators, protect the humanities, protect critical thinking, and teach your students to interrogate AI output with the same rigour you would expect them to apply to any other source. For everyone, use these extraordinary tools, but use them with your eyes open, with honest professional scepticism, and with an understanding that the most important intelligence in the room is still humankind for the time being. The AI that helped me write an email reply last October is not the same AI we are discussing today. And the AI we're discussing today will not be the same AI we will discuss in October of this year. That pace of change is part of the challenge, but it is also, if we're honest, part of what makes the moment so extraordinary. Since my time as an undergraduate over 30 years ago, and in all the time since, whether as a graduate student or in almost 20 years of working in technology and industry, I've never felt more strongly that the work being done by institutions like DIRDI, by universities like this one, by researchers like some of the people in this room, genuinely matters. Not just commercially and not just scientifically, but for the wider benefit of societal institutions, subjects, citizens and humans. B would, I think, understand. The tools change. The instinct to preserve the golden thread of what matters and to make sense of the world for those who come after us does not. Thank you.